And you're watching Devil in Divorce, and we're back with another hot topic today from the beautiful Riverside Hotel on Las Olas. Today we're talking lifetime alimony with Joe Costello, my attorney and co-host, and our new friend Al.
Hi.
Great to see you. I'm so glad you were going to come in and share your story with us. Your story's really interesting.
Yeah.
Tell us about it, Al.
Well, basically, I was married for 23-year marriage, and unfortunately, I had an accident. The marriage didn't work out after that. So I figured I'd go to, we'd have a dissolution of the marriage, and we went in front of the judge thinking that there would be some justice because we couldn't come to an amicable agreement.
It was a contentious situation, right?
Contentious situation, yes. And when we went in front of the judge said to us, obviously equitable distribution for the years of marriage, permanent alimony. I was never offered any other alimony. At the time, I didn't even know other alimony existed. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of like driven in, not driven, but I was more like coerced into agreeing to something I didn't even understand.
You didn't understand
because I never even knew about permanent alimony. Prior to my divorce, it was my first marriage. And I thought that was a little bit disheartening because I felt like I was cheated. And now, 12 years later, I'm still paying permanent alimony, but I've had numerous changes of circumstances during that time, and it's been very frustrating dealing with the legal system because when you try to go back to the legal system and try to get some justice to modify, it's been denied.
And you can't get a modification. You've had a denial. I think you told me
Twice.
before two times.
Can you tell us
and you're
about
on your third, correct? 10 months in.
This is my second modification attempt. The first one was denied. The second one is on the process for the last 10 months, and numerous legal fees later, I had to wait a long time to be able to try to modify again because of the legal costs, which are exorbitant, just to try to get a modification when you're on permanent alimony. It's not something that's just given because of the fact that you have a change of circumstances.
Al, can we go back to the original divorce, if you'd be so kind? I want to be clear. Was it something that was resolved by agreement, or did you go to a trial and a judge imposed this permanent alimony obligation on you?
I went to trial. You
went to trial. Let me ask you this. If you could go back and do it again, you'd mentioned that you weren't able to resolve it amicably by way of an agreement. I'm assuming there was a mediation involved?
There was a mediator, yes, there was.
And you weren't able to reach an agreement at mediation?
No, we were not.
Okay, so that's always the tricky part. In any family law case, and certainly in any divorce, there's going to be a requirement by the judge before you have a trial to go to mediation and have an opportunity to resolve your differences yourselves. With the benefit of hindsight, if you could go back and do it over again, would you have gone about mediation differently now that you know the result?
I was pro-mediation. I wanted to settle.
Okay.
I just couldn't afford the terms that they were offering.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Yeah, that's the unfortunate give and take with mediation. There's a give and take that's involved, and
Right.
and sometimes it's unpalatable, and a lot of times people care.
Well, and I think you just said before too that you just thought alimony was alimony. You didn't really understand that permanent alimony, from what I understand, ends at death.
Well, permanent alimony is, in theory, supposed to go on indefinitely. Now, the law allows for modification under certain circumstances, but unfortunately, for the layperson, you hear words like substantial change in circumstances. Well, what does that mean? That can mean three different things to the three of us.
And you told us that you had cancer, correct? And that was the
Yes,
reason that you need the modification this time.
That's why I needed the modification, because I had cancer. I'm a cancer survivor, non-Hodgkin's, and with the paralysis, it was just too much for me to continue employment, so I was permanently disabled. I'm on Social Security, SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance. And even with that, it's been very difficult for me to get a modification.
That sounds so incredible to me.
Al, can you tell me about the first go-around with the modification? Whenever there's something imposed by a judge versus an agreement, judges typically are going to look at that and be more amenable to a modification. Were you given a reason why your first modification was denied?
The first modification was denied in lieu of the fact that I started going on short-term disability, which meant salary continuation. Because I was in my company for 30 years. And because I was a 30-year management person, they allowed me to get short-term disability for 6 months. Now, during that period of time, I knew I was going to go on Social Security because I couldn't sustain my workability, because I knew I had cancer. And I applied for Social Security, but it takes, as you know, a year to two sometimes to get even approved. And during that time, I was collecting salary continuation. So when I went before the judge says to me, well, you still have the same income you did when you were married. And I go, yeah, but this is going to run out in the next 2 months, and I'm going to be out of a job, and I'm going to be out of a salary that's well over 6 figures.
And my guess is that you were told, come back when it actually drops off, right?
Wow.
And she actually told me, at this time, we're not going to approve your modification because you haven't determined a prima facie case, a substantial change of circumstances, even though I was not employed at the time and I was on disability already. So it wasn't
And
enough.
what was that word that you used for all the laymen that are watching this and all the non-lawyers?
It's almost like, it's a Latin term. It essentially means like it is what it is. It's definitive proof of what you're saying. So
he has to go back and show definitive proof that actual change has taken place before he can even get the modification.
Right. Courts are not going to step in and say, we're going to change things in advance. They're going to say, come to us when there's actually been that substantial change in your financial circumstances. It sounds like in your set of circumstances, you had on the horizon the change in circumstances. It just hadn't occurred yet. Is that?
Absolutely.
Am I on track there?
Absolutely.
Okay. It's a difficult thing. A lot of what we do as family law attorneys is post-judgment, meaning once the divorce is final. It's almost like starting the case over again. There's the same financial disclosure requirements. You get attorneys involved. You're dealing with a judge. There's likely to be another mediation
Huge
requirement.
amount of fees, I would think, right?
Sure, and it can get costly. And one of the biggest drivers and one of the reasons that a lot of cases settle at mediation, Al, you've unfortunately learned this the hard way, is the possible cost of taking a case to trial. So it's not only that uncertain result with having a stranger in a black robe make decisions about your life, but it's also the fees that are involved in that. And those fees can grow exponentially the more people fight.
Yeah, I mean, I know we talked a little bit about you're involved in lobbying for some change in legislation and some things that are happening. What do you want to see change?
Oh, there's numerous changes that need to take effect with family reform and family law reform. I can name 4 right off the top of my head.
Can you give us the one that's most important to you?
The ability to retire. That's probably the first one, and there's 4 that I can list right off that are very important that I would like to list.
The ability to retire. Because again, it's permanent and it's a lifetime. So the ability to retire, because a lot of people's income change when they retire.
Right.
And I don't think that's something, I never took that into consideration. This is all new news to me today.
It is. The law says alimony, unless you agree otherwise, alimony is modifiable. But as you've learned the hard way, there's no guarantees. And unfortunately, if there hasn't been that substantial change at the time you're seeking it, even if that substantial change comes just a few months down the road, you could be left stuck with that obligation that was imposed all those years ago.
I would like to see 4 major changes happen to the law. Number 1, first and foremost, there should be guidelines to this alimony, because every courthouse you face or every judge you face has a different opinion and a different way of interpreting the law. Mm-hmm. And no 2 cases are the same, but no 2 awards are the same either. And I would like to see the 4 changes to make. Number 1, there should be a limitation on the number of years you pay alimony. It should be limited to half the duration of the marriage.
You said something to me earlier, which sounded extremely reasonable to me, half the duration of the marriage. So you're married for 10 years, you get 5 years of alimony. Right. That sounds to me like most reasonable people watching this would say, I'm surprised it's not that way already.
Well, that's a remedy that's available. There are different types of alimony, and we want to get to the rest of the things you'd like to see changed, Al. But there's different types of alimony. There's permanent, which we've described, which is, it sounds like what it is. It's permanent alimony. Then there's durational alimony, which you mentioned, Karen. Durational is for people that kind of fall into that middle ground, that 7 to 17 year range. That's what's called a moderate term marriage. And durational alimony is just that. It's usually about half the term of the marriage. It's a defined amount. It's a defined period of time. Oftentimes that period of time is non-modifiable, but the amount is. So there's that. There's a few other types of alimony, but it sounds like what you're talking about is that dreaded permanent alimony obligation that a lot of people get stuck with, either by way of agreement when they didn't fully understand that,
right,
or a judge imposed it after a costly trial.
I would like to also see some changes to the law that involve the litigation costs. There should be a cap on litigation costs. It shouldn't cost me $30,000 to modify my divorce agreement, or more, at this case. I would also like to see, like I said, a cap on the length of the marriage, half the length of the marriage. I'd like to see the ability to get a modification in court. Like you said, there's no guarantee, Joe. But you know what? When you try to go in front of a judge and you try to explain change of circumstances, and it's very subjective, obviously I don't want to spend $35,000 being on Social Security and being underwater, so to speak, and having to explain myself. It's like going to divorce part 2. And going, like you said, you'd have to present it like if it was a normal divorce.
It is. It's almost
And
restarting
it's
the movie.
daunting, and it's frustrating because I have no control over that judge's final decision. I know that right now I have to find $35,000 to pay legal expenses for something that I know is justified when I have no job. And it's not an automatic thing that you just go in front of a judge and say, you know what, Mr. Judge, I lost my job several years ago. I don't make the same income I have now. I go, why can't I get some relief? And 10 months later and $35,000 later, I still haven't gotten an answer. And that's where I'm frustrated.
I really, and I can't believe that your ex-wife isn't at all sympathetic to the situation and isn't have some level of compassion after a 23-year marriage. I think for me, that's very perplexing.
Well, it's difficult because whether it's by way of an agreement or a judge imposing it, the counter argument to that is this is money that I'm expecting, this is money that I was awarded, this is money that I rely on to some degree. And I recognize that.
It sounds like a huge level of entitlement to me. I mean, I'm just speaking off the record, like as far as, just somebody who walks in, again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm just somebody with an opinion.
Sure.
It seems like a lot.
It can be a lot. The legal fees can be a lot, the obligation itself can be a lot. And forget the financial part of it, certainly the emotional toll that it takes is something that
Very bad.
that doesn't really get factored in, quite frankly, in a courthouse. I hear you, Al. I understand what you're going through. It's a difficult time. Certainly, the law is designed to provide relief for people that have gone through some change, whether it's in their health or their income or their living situation. But unfortunately, there's no guarantees and there's no guidelines in effect. I do tend to agree with you on that. There should be some semblance of guidelines so you kind of know what to expect going in, much in the way there is with child support. Alimony is still kind of the Wild West in most states, and it's no different here.
And I'm sure that's going to be another hot topic on one of our episodes of Devil in Divorce.
Absolutely.
I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about child support and what's wrong with that system too. So I'm sure we're going to get into that. I want to thank you. What a difficult story for you to share. Thank you so much for the impact that you're making on other people who are in your situation.
I appreciate it, Joe and Karen, for giving me the opportunity to share the hardship, both with a disability, a financial hardship, and the fact that I'm trying to fight or change the law that's been in place for hundreds of years, and that's been, it's unbalanced. I look at it this way. That's why the statue of justice has blindfold and the scales are lopsided, because if you're going to find justice in family court, it's very difficult to find.
It can be elusive, that's for
Yes.
sure. But Al, thank you very
Well,
much.
keep up the fight. Keep up the fight.
you.
Stay tuned. You're watching Devil in Divorce.